This coming Shabbos is already Rosh Chodesh Av, and it is only natural that we start speaking about Tisha B'Av. So today's share will be trying to define the essence of Tisha B'Av, and in what way is Tisha B'Av different than the other 3 fast days. Arba Tzoimos, 4 fast days associated with Churban Beis Hamikdash. And they're all mentioned in the same posuk in the Novi Zechariah, in a very positive context. Tzom haravi v'tzom hachamishi, tzom hashvi v'tzom hasiri, yihu lebeis Yehuda, lesoson ulesimcha ulemoyadim toivim, u'emes v'sholem ahevu. So these 4 fast days, Tisha B'Av first and foremost, Shavuos Abedam Zasora B'Tevis Tzom Gedaliyahu. What is their essence? Avelus or tshuva. Tanis Lamed Omid Aleph, we learn a brayse. Kol hamitzvos hanoegos ba'ovel, noegos b'Tisha B'Av. Also, b'achila v'shtiya b'rachitza b'sicha b'nisan b'tashim shamito. Rashi comments, Kol hamitzvos hanoegos ba'ovel, noegos b'Tisha B'Av. Also, b'achila v'shtiya b'ra'ovel, eats and ovel drinks. So in what way is the mitzvah to fast associated with Avelis? Rashi writes, also b'chila v'shtiya has nothing to do with Avelis. But the Brayse gives us the entire package. What are all the prohibitions on a Jewish person on Tisha B'Av? But Avelis is only from Rechitza and on. Chamishu Inuyim, which are Rechitza, Sicha, Ne'ilas Sandal, Tashmish Hamito, Chamishu Inuyim that we also find in Yom Kippur, and by an Ovel, it's Achilas Bosa V'Shtiyas Yayin. So these are Mishum Avelus. But the Rambam writes, very first Halacha Perek Melchas Taniyos, יש שם יומם שכל ישראל מסענה בהם מפני הצרות שיראו לאבותינו, כדי לעורר הלבובוס ולפתוח בדרכי התשובה. There are days in which we all fast because of tragedy that struck our forefathers. כדי לעורר הלבובוס ולפתוח בדרכי התשובה. And the Rambam deals with Arbat Tzoimos, the 4 fast days that we just mentioned a moment ago. So the Rambam's interpretation is that it is about Tshuva, not about Avelis. And the Chassam Sofer argues in Siman Ches Tshuvas Or Chaim that fasting is never associated with Avelis, only with Tshuva. However, in a very well-known shir, I said many times, and it's printed in Mechas Osher Moedim Chelik Beis, I explained there are 4 different categories of Tanis, of fast days. Tshuva, Ritzui, Avelus, and Zeicher. I don't want to go over it again. Everybody can learn Minchas Osher Moedim Chelik Beis. And my feeling is, if the Brayse says, Kol hamitzvos hanoegos ba'ovel, noegos b'Tisha B'Av, osa b'achila, shtiya, rachitza, sicha, then it does have to do with Avelis. The kavanah of Rashi is, but after all, achila v'shtiya is not mitzvahs hanoegos ba'ovel. And if we compare Tisha B'Av to an ovel, then osa b'achila v'shtiya is not because similar to an ovel. But I do argue that it is Mishum Avelus, because the essence of Arbat Tzoimos is tragedy and Avelus. The Avelus associated with Churban Bayis doesn't necessarily need to have exactly the same manifestations and expressions and halachas as Ovel al Hameis. Doesn't need to be exactly the same. So the Chassam Sofer quotes the Rambam, Lo oirer halavovos. And once again, I don't think there's any contradiction. When we fast on these 4 tragic days, the fast takes us back to the distant past. Churban Beis Hamikdash thousands of years ago, and we mourn. But the fast also fixes our gaze on the future, on the horizon, from the present to the future. We mourn the Beis Hamikdash of then, and we do tshuva to be zeicher to the Beis HaMikdash anew. Mitablim al Bayis HaSheni, and we do tshuva to be zeicher to the Bayis HaShlishi. I just want to note that even in Hilchas Avelis, the Rambam writes that every oven needs to do tshuva. Everything in Yiddishkeit comes back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We mourn the Korban, and we are required to do tshuva to be zeicher to a new Beis HaMikdash. And the same as in Ovel. We mourn a family member that passed away. But if tragedy strikes us, it is HaKadosh Baruch Hu calling out to us, so we need to do tshuva. So there's no stira at all between Avelis and tshuva. Tchilos Avelis v'soifei tshuva. These fast days bring to mind the remembrance of Chorban Beis HaMikdash, and we mourn. And mitoichu Avelis, we need to do tshuva, hopefully to be zoicha. Sha'Kodesh Baruch Hu yashkin shchinosoi b'tzion. Would there be a difference between Tisha B'Av and the other 3 days? The Tashbit says yes. Chelik Beisim Areisha and out of the Tashbit says only Tisha B'Av is Mishum Avelis, but the other 3 days are not Mishum Avelis. And I wonder, but the Novi quotes them all together. It is totally unreasonable that in essence, essentially, there's a difference between Tisha B'Av and the others. They might have different halachas, but not a different essence, not a different mahus. More than that. I learned from Tosfos and the Ramban that Mitzat Tekonos Neviim, Tisha B'Av, and the other 3 are exactly the same. They're mentioned in the same posuk. Tzom HaRavi, Tzom HaChamishi, Tzom HaShvi, Tzom HaAsiri. So Tosfos and Megillah Daf Heyom Mit Beis write a gewaltige chiddush. In the days of the Neviim, all 4 tzomis were not a cycle of 24 hours, just 12 hours. Mi'alois HaShachar ad Tzeis HaKoichovim. 4 tzomis were not also berachitza v'sicha v'neilas asandal, only fast. It is only after Chorban Beis Sheni, when they saw that this terrible, horrific day, Tisha B'Av, is an awful day. It is a day in which we lost both Botei Migdash, Abayis Harishon and Abayis Sheni. It is only then that they added on more chumras on Tisha B'Av, and they instituted that the fast starts not by Elosh Shachar, but by the Shkia the day before. And they also were metaken that it's not only enough, also b'chila v'shtia, chamishu inuyim as well. The Ramban in Torah Sodom has a totally different approach. And the B'S Yosef and Tov Kuf Nun quotes the Ramban. Different, but based on the same fundamental assumption. The Ramban writes, Mitzat Kones Neviim, all the 4 fast days begin by the Shkia. Mitzat Kones Neviim, they were all Osir Berachitza V'Sicha V'Nilas Asandal Chamishu Inuyim. It was only in the days of glory in which we build the Bayis Sheni, and once again we were Makar of Karbonates, and once again the Kodesh Baruch Hu had a Shechin in Yerushalayim, that they were Makel by the other 3. So what is the common denominator? Tzad HaShovish Ben HaTosfos Varamban. Mitzat Konos Neviim din achad v'geder achad lekol arbaat hatzomis ve'ein bein zeh lezeh v'lo klum. They're exactly the same. According to Tosfos lekula, according to the Ramban lechumra. So there's no room to argue that different concepts, Tisha B'Av is Avelis and the other 3 are not Avelis. What the Tashbitz means to say is only in Tisha B'Av are we noyeg dinei Avelis, and that's a fact. The other days, all we have is Achila V'Shtia. The Mishnah Berurah does write that a Bal Nefesh should be machber all Dalet Tzomis Chamishu Inuyim. But that's just Midas Chasidus, that's a Bal Nefesh. So once again, in essence, they are the same. There's a Gavaldige Chiddush in Sefer Nazirus Shimshon. He was a Choshev Ha'achron. And he writes, a choyle that cannot fast the entire day, and the doctors tell him in advance, at some stage, noon, afternoon, you need to drink, you need to eat. It is preferable, in halacha, he should eat by night and fast by day, and not the other way around. And that's a Gavaldige Chiddush. So the Nazir Shimshon Tov Kuf Nun Daled writes, the Ikar Hatanis is b'yom, and therefore it's preferable to be makel by night, he should be able to fast by day. Why does he think that Ikar Hatan is b'yom? L'chayre, this chiddush is dependent on the Tosfos and the Ramban, according to Tosfos, it makes sense what he says. Because according to Tosfos, the original Tekona was only Me'alus Shachar Tzeisik Echovim. That was Tekonos Nevi'im. In the days of Bayis Sheni, there no longer were Nevi'im. And the Churban Bayis Sheni was in the days of Chachmei HaMishnah, Harishonim. It was in the days of Hillel HaZaken. So fasting by day is Divrei Kabbalah, it's Tekonos Nevi'im. Fasting by night is only Divrei Sofrim. And Tekonos Nevi'im Chomer me Divrei Sofrim. So it makes sense. One should eat by night and fast by day. But according to the Ran, there's no room for such a Kiddush at all. Because, yes, the other Dalet Seimis, they were Mekel. But Tisha B'Av stays intact in its original form. And the Nevi'im were Mitaken, Leiloi Kiyoimoi. So why would fasting by day be more important than fasting by night? But one could raise a counter-argument and say, the mere fact that the other three tzaimis, they were mekel balaylo, and we fast only by day, doesn't that prove shayoim chomer min halaylo? Right, Tisha B'Av, there is no difference. But once upon a time, Tisha B'Av was the same as the other three. So isn't it enough to prove the fact that the chomer were mekel by the other three, that yoim ikar legabe halaylo? Would one say the same chiddush regarding Yom Kippur? And would we say the fact that Chomer Mekel Balaylo, V'chmira B'yom, does that prove by Yom Kippur as well that Yom Chomer Min Halaylo? Of course not. That's ridiculous. Yom Kippur is Min HaTorah. Yom Kippur is Kores. That stands apart. And if Leiloi Ki Yoimoi, Din Achad Yesh Lohem, they're both Kores. They're both Min HaTorah. There's no difference whatsoever between day and night. But Tisha B'Av and the other three tzaimis were born together. Same Geder, same essence, all associated with Churban Beis HaMikdash. And therefore, it is reasonable to argue the fact that Chachomim were Mekel, Balaylo, proves that Yom Chomer Min Halaylo, even by Tisha B'Av. Because essentially, as we explained before, Tisha B'Av and the other three were born together. Tisha B'Av and the other three, four sides of the same coin. Most coins have only two sides. But in Halacha, some coins have four sides. And therefore, the Psak of Mzir Shimshon makes sense. Lo mabayre divrei Tosfos, even according to Ran. But on the other hand, ein halacha kemoisoi. Lo mabayre divrei Ran, afiru lo divrei Tosfos. And why is that? Svara Pshuta, as long as you fast, you need to fast. And when the time comes, you could no longer fast, then you're poter min hatzayim. But why would it make sense to eat and drink by night when you're feeling well and you have no need to eat and drink? That doesn't make sense, and therefore, ein halacha k'naziras shimshon. We find a similar question. And the Steichemen has a big kuntres in Mareches Yom HaKippurim. If a doctor tells a person, Tzom Gedalia and Yom Kippur are very close one to another, just a week between them. If you're going to fast Tzom Gedalia, you can't fast on Yom Kippur. Choose which day you want to fast. And the Steichemen brings days Lakan Velakan. Day Shel Avraham maintains, you got to fast Tzom Gedalia because that's the first. If you could fast, you got to fast. When Yom Kippur comes, you'll ask the doctor again. If you can't fast, then you're poter min hatzayim. That you could fast because of an upcoming one. Oyel Moshe, for instance, he maintains no, because Yom Kippur is far more chomer than Tzom Gedalia. Mevatlim et hakal mepnei chamor. Even Tzom Gedalia, you should be able to fast in Yom Kippur. Would that be the same question, Leil Tisha B'Av and Yom Tisha B'Av? As long as you could fast. Tomorrow you can't, then you can't. Yes, lachalak, we could argue that these two questions are not interdependent, bein lekula, bein lechomer. Even those that say, eat Tzom Gedalia, you should be able to fast in Yom Kippur, might agree that, no, by Tisha B'Av, no. Fast as long as you can, and eat tomorrow. Because Tzom Gedalia and Yom Kippur are 2 different days, 2 different mitzvahs. One min HaTorah, one midrabanan. A week separates. They're not the same mitzvah. So it's more reasonable to argue one mitzvah for another. But Leil Tisha B'Av and Yom Tisha B'Av, it's all the same. This is Tisha B'Av. And therefore, that is reasoning that by Tisha B'Av we would say, better to be Mekayim Tisha B'Av Medivrei Kabbalah than be Mekayim Tisha B'Av Alayla, which is only Midrabon, only Medivrei Sefer. On the other hand, there's room to argue, even those that say you do eat Tzom Gedalia, Kedei to fast on Tisha B'Av, might agree that you don't eat B'Leil Tisha B'Av to fast B'Yom Tisha B'Av. Because you eat Tzom Gedalia Kedei to fast in Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur is Manatoira and it's Chayav Koros, and it is far, far more important than Tzom Gedalia. The difference between Divrei Kabbalah and Divrei Sefer is not as meaningful and as significant as the difference between Tzom Gedalia and Yom Kippur, which is a Chayav Koros. So these two questions are not Ho B'Hotalia, but nevertheless, I want to once again say, Ein Alochik and Azira Shimshon. And it is far more reasonable. As long as you fast, you gotta fast. And when the stage comes, you can no longer fast, then you're pot. But this brings us to an interesting interpretation and argument between Gedolei Achronim. So there are two halachas in which the Shulchan Aruch says, Din Tisha B'Av Kedin Yom Kippur. Taf Kuf Nun Gimel Leiloi Ki Yoimoi. All the other fast days start Alois Shachar. Only Tisha B'Av is Yom Kippur. Shkia. The other halachas Taf Kuf Nun Daled. Uboris Amanikas Mesanas Umashlipas B'Tisha B'Av Kamosha Mesanas Umashlimas B'Yom Kippurim. Pregnant woman, nursing woman don't need to fast other fast days. Only Tisha B'Av, like Yom Kippur. However, B'din Chayla, Tisha B'Av is very different than Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur it is only if a human life is in jeopardy. Only if it's Konas Nefoshes. Only a Chodesh Yesh Beskona could eat in Yom Kippur. Tisha B'Av, every Chayla. Every Chayla. B'mokem Chayli loy gozru Rabbona. That's the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch Tov Kuf Nun Dalet. The Aruch Shulchan Aruch, Chaim Brisker and Stencil both learn from the Lashon of Shulchan Aruch. B'mokem Chayli loy gozru Rabbona. If you're ill, you don't have Tisha B'Av. It's like Hutro, not the Huyo. Story of the Briskerov. And this is so typical because sometimes the Briskerov is very sharp and very cynical. So the story goes, a person once told the Briskerov, my doctor told me I can't fast on Tisha B'Av, but I feel fine. I feel great. So I'm going to try. I'm going to give it a try. Maybe I will, maybe I could fast. So the Tisha B'Av smiled. So the Briskerov smiled and he told him, that's great, but don't forget Kabbalas Tanas B'Mincha Erev Tisha B'Av. That's strange. What the Briskerov meant to say, following the footsteps of his great father, if you want to fast, okay, go ahead. But it's a Tanas Yochid. It's not a Tanas Sibor. You have no Tisha B'Av. You don't have Tisha B'Av. Because if your doctor told you you need to eat, then B'mokem Choyli loy gozru Rabbonim. So to you it's going to be a Tanas Yochid. And if it's a Tanas Yochid, Tzorech Kabbalas Tanas B'Mincha. That's an interesting approach. But the Chassam Sofer obviously had a different opinion. Chuvas Chassam Sofer Kuf Nun Zayin Orachaim, the Chassam Sofer says that once he was ill and he had no choice, he needed to eat and drink on Tisha B'Av, and he was misupik whether he could have an Aliyah B'Mincha. And the Chassam Sofer writes 3 svaras. I'll skip 1 and 2 because they're not nogeya to today's shir. The third svara is a choyle shetzorech lechol b'Tisha B'Av cannot eat more than is required, cannot eat more than he needs, and therefore he is still considered fasting, and he could be yoyled at Torah. This doesn't go together with the Chaim Brisker and the Briskerov. According to the Chassam Sofer, Choyle Shebes Sekona has Tisha B'Av. He has Tisha B'Av very much, and he needs to fast. He can only eat as much as is required and not more. So I mentioned the Nazira Shimshon just a few minutes ago. Many years ago, I had an interesting shaila, which is in a way similar. A person came to me in the early afternoon Tisha B'Av, and he said, I feel awful. I feel that I'm fainting. I am dehydrated. I need to drink. So many times you're not feeling well, Tisha B'Av, or an other fast day. That's what fast days are all about. We need to fast not to feel well. People fast, they don't feel well. And that's part of how you're supposed to feel when you remember Chorban Beis HaMikdash. However, when it's extreme, that is a din of a choila. So this person told me, I need to drink. I'm going to faint. However, I think if I'm going to take a cold shower, I'm going to feel much better and maybe I won't need to drink. Should I shower? That's a fascinating question. Would we be mekel by the chitza kedei to avoid needing to eat or drink? Is the chitza kal legabe achila v'shtia? And machila noiseh akal techila. So this brings us back to the Machloikes Tosfos and Daran. According to Tosfos, the original Takon of the Nevi'im was only fasting. Chamish Uniyim came at a later stage by Chorban Bayis Sheni. So it's reasonable to say better he should shower, shouldn't need to drink. According to Daran, all four were also Mitzat Konos HaNevi'im b'Chamish Uniyim. They were makel by the others, but Tisha B'Av stayed in its original form, and therefore the chitza wouldn't be kal than achila v'shtia. But I'm using the same argument I used 20 minutes ago. Isn't it enough the fact that by the other three fast days they were makel by chitza and not by achila? Doesn't that prove that achila is chomem merachitza? I think the argument regarding rechitza and achila is more powerful than Leil Tisha B'Av v'yoimoi. Because Yom Kippur as well, achila v'shtia chomer tvei merachitza, according to most Rishonim, rechitza and Yom Kippur is only midrabanan. Even those Rishonim that maintain its menatoir and Yom Edafayin Ches, there is no chorus only by achila v'shtia, and therefore it is reasonable to argue better to be matzah rechitza than shtia. But that was not my psak, and my psak was go drink. Because it is a subjective feeling that if I'm going to shower, I might not need to drink. Probably it would make no difference. People need to drink when they're dehydrated. Showering doesn't give you more fluids in your body. Yes, your skin absorbs fluids, but probably he still will need to drink. For the first 15 minutes, first half hour, he's going to feel better, but ultimately in a short while, he will feel the same. So why be over both an rechitza and shtia? If you need to drink, you need to drink. You don't need to shower. And that is why you can't shower. And that was ultimately my psak. So we discussed both the essence of the fast days and some interesting questions and shaylas and chikle halachas. I want to go back to the very first statement in today's shir. There is no stira between Avelis and Tshuva. They supplement each other. We fast because we mourn. And when we mourn, we must do tshuva. La'oirer halavavos b'da'akei tshuva. And that is the very first halacha in Hilchos Taniyos of the Rambam. When tragedy strikes, whether it's an individual or community or Klal Yisrael, we must understand that Kodesh Baruch Hu is speaking to us and He's calling out to us. Come home. Kinderlach, come home. Do tshuva. And the Rambam has his unique interpretation. The Rambam's understanding is keri is a lotion of mikra, coincidence. So it's very easy. Whenever tragedy strikes, we try to understand what happened. We did so much research to understand the COVID-19 virus. And a Miran, we know exactly why it happened, how it happened, and the Perenches and Kalin were built in a reckless fashion. We still don't know why the 12-story building in Surfside in Florida came crashing down, and tragically tens of Jews were killed, many of them still missing. Yes, there always is a technical explanation. But it is a Kodesh Baruch Hu calling out to us. The Maral teaches us that whatever happens to the world, there is a Sibo and there is Sibas HaSibo, the direct cause and the indirect cause. So the Gemara says, why do we witness the eclipse of the moon, of the sun, Likui HaMa'oros? But astronomers could predict in advance, 500 years in advance, when this will happen. So the Maral explains everything that happens in the world has a direct cause, a physical one, a scientific one. But ultimately it is a Kodesh Baruch Hu that planned creation, and he set all the laws of nature into motion. So why did a Kodesh Baruch Hu plan the astronomical system in a way that Ma'oros loikim? That is the question, not the direct but the indirect cause. Hakal Sofi Varashus Nesuno. When tragedy strikes, there always is a way to explain why and how. But we need to believe it's Hashgacha Protis. Why did this building implode and not the other? Why did it implode when so many people were in the building and not when they all were out of the building? Why? It is a Kodesh Baruch Hu calling out to us. It's more than 2,000 years, Ma'as Sheposka HaNevuah. We don't have prophets walking amongst us, and nobody knows exactly what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. But we all know He is calling out to us. And my feeling is, when tragedy strikes an individual, it is about you. You need to do tshuva and be better. When tragedy strikes a community, it is also about our communal life. It is not only as individuals, but as communities. Your communities need to be better. So COVID struck the entire people. Tens of thousands of Jews perished. Millions of people perished. But the recent tragedies in Florida, in Miran, are more on the communal level. It's not illness that strikes an individual and the family needs to come closer to each other and altogether closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It is the communities as well. So I'm not a Navi, V'loi ben Navi. But we need to be better. And our communities need to be better in many different ways. We give a lot of tzedakah. But tzedakah is not always a reflection of compassion and of caring. We need more compassion in our communities, more caring, more more decency, and so many different areas. And each and every individual, more Torah, more Kavonas Atfila, more precious, more Kedusha. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is calling out to us. La'oirer halavavos v'leftoach bedarkei hatshuva. So the Navi promises, Tzoma Raviv, Tzoma Chashvishi, Tzoma Shviv, Tzoma Asiri, Yula Beis Yehuda, L'sosan u'L'simcha l'moyedim tovim. When will that be? You'll be better. You will love emes. You will love Torah's emes. You'll be mitaken chorban bayis rishon mishum bittul Torah. And you will love harmony and peace and shalom. And you will be mitaken sinas chinem that brought about the chorban of bayis shayni. It is then, and only then, that we will be zoicha to divrei hanovi tzoma raviv tzoma chamishi tzoma shviv tzoma asiri yiu lebeis Yehuda lesosain ulesimchu ulemoyedim tovim bebias Moshiach tzidkenu b'mheru v'yomeinu amen.